We're very happy you've chosen to join us. We know your time is valuable, and we are glad you have chosen to spend a little time with us today. Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana, and we welcome our chapter president, who's always with us, Duncan Giles. Welcome again, Duncan.
Thanks, Larry. As always, it's good to be here.
I'm glad we did the test. I had the wrong had the wrong thing up, so now I've got you back. So we are now connected fully and well. So we have a lot of issues to talk about today as we head into
You
spring.
say me being connected like it's a good thing, Larry. I don't know. Some days yes, some days no. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Just how connected are you, by the way?
It depends on the day.
I was going to say disconnected is something I feel quite often, but that's a whole other thing. Let's talk about a number of issues we have today. We want to talk about something that I do believe we don't talk about enough. There are two different ways to discuss public issues: in a serious way and in a not so serious way. And sometimes we do post developments on our Facebook page. If you want to like or follow it, just go to NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana. Use that as a search phrase on Facebook, and you can find us there. We try to update that regularly and just what's going on in within the regulatory realm, the federal employee realm, and in Congress. But sometimes, particularly in Congress, and sometimes in other realms, you hear discussions of things and proposals that are made. And there is a difference between a proposal and something that has either a very good chance of becoming law or is in that pipeline to become law. So, Duncan, you and I talk about a lot of issues. A couple of examples would be what's going on with telework in the Congress and within federal agencies. This proposal to claw back that 8-year plan to fund IRS and hire staff, upgrade our technology, and other things. I mean, you're hearing proposals to have federal employees all come back to work and just stop telework, essentially. You hear proposals to just do away with that extra funding for IRS. I think we need to differentiate proposals, and let's face it, sometimes it's political grandstanding. It could be somebody from any point of view in Congress, any philosophy or party, but they grandstand. They want to make a headline. They want to make some kind of an impression on their own followers. Just because that happens does not necessarily mean this, whatever that proposal is, will become law. So give us a little background on this proposal versus serious discussion and some issues that you've probably been seeing in the news and what does and does not have any real chance of happening.
Yeah, political grandstanding. I'm shocked, I tell you, that this happens in Congress by either party. Apparently there was some confusion from some folks over the last bulletin that came out when they saw the thing that there are some in Congress that want to pull back on telework, or they want to pull back the funds that we got over the Reduction Act to basically fund us and get us back to where we need to be. These are just going to be bills. They're bills that come up, in every single Congress. I'm to age myself, everything I needed to learn about a bill, I learned from Schoolhouse Rock. I'm just a bill. And, but it was actually a great way of showing younger people exactly how it works. These bills get proposed, then they get voted on. And they have to be voted on by both houses. And then, if they are, it goes up to the president. Well, a lot of these bills may not even make it out of a committee, much less go to a full House or a full Senate, and that before it goes to the other body, be it representative to Senate or vice versa. So when you see these types of things that are happening, this is, if you see it in the bulletin, this is National NTU's way of keeping you informed, letting you know what's going on so that you can make your voice heard with your representative, with your senators, and let them know that you're not in favor of this. If you're upset about potentially, losing some telework rights. We do have contractual rights, but if they pass a law that could, that would trump a contract. So if you're upset about some of these things, by all means, you can go to the NTU website and it'll show you very easily how you can make your voice heard on this to your representative and to your senators, that you're not happy that they may want to claw money back to get the extra funding, for technology, for people, for everything that we do need, or that, if you're happy with your telework situation, instead of expanding it, a lot of people want to restrict it, and you need to make your voice heard on that as well.
So again, difference between proposal and something that has a genuine opportunity to become law or be passed in a budget, that kind of thing. One thing I've been reading about, I did post something about this on our own Facebook page. And I don't know how IRS is handling this. You can maybe tell us. But something you've dealt with as long as you've been involved in NTEU is this whole issue of office space, because NTU does have an opportunity to negotiate when there are office space issues coming up. And what this particular reporter at Federal News Network found out is that even though telework is becoming more popular and the hybrid is very popular, which is mostly what IRS has, where you work part of the time in a third location, often your home, or a second or third location, often at your home, or you work in the office, a little bit of each, with some limits on how often you can actually be at home. Well, some agencies, even though they have all these hybrid and teleworking employees, have been hesitant to give up their office space. Two questions for you, Duncan. Number one, what's IRS doing on this? And number two, what do you make of this information?
Yeah, it's not, answer the second one first. It's not surprising to me at all that federal agencies want to hold on to what they have. What the fear is out there, and the IRS is one of these agencies, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act that we got to hire more people, is that we may not need the space now, but we're going to need it in the future. What folks have to keep in mind is, if you're teleworking, if you're a frequent teleworker, that means that you need to be in the office twice a pay period, that you are not entitled to a desk. Literally, the IRS can say, okay, it's going to be 3-to-1, or it can be more negotiated locally, depending upon the situation, that, there can be 3 people sharing a desk. So, the folks in facilities look at these types of things across every agency and say, okay, how much space do we really need? Well, like I said, they're all counting on hiring more people. They want to hire more people. And the fact is, giving up space is not as easy as it looks. On the outset, it's okay, we can just leave. Well, no, there are leases involved. There are moving costs. Every time that you give up an office, you have to basically make it back to where it's a rentable space for the landlord. So if it's not in a federal building, you're talking about spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, depending upon how large the office is, to make it back to a shell that the landlord can rent, and those funds have to be appropriated. So it's never an easy thing to do. But they have done it in the past. I do anticipate them doing it in the future, moving towards this as telework becomes more accepted, that you will see more and more space being given up and more desk sharing going on across the IRS and other governmental agencies.
And it should be pointed out that when you have new hires, these new hires are not necessarily able to telework for a period of time, correct?
That's going to be the interesting thing. During the pandemic, we had people picking up their equipment and sending them home to learn on their own. Now, traditionally, and so they've been teleworking ever since. Traditionally, until you reach that journey level, your full working level, that you're not, especially in your first year, you're not supposed to be teleworking. Now, if they want to let people teleworking, NTU is not going to have any argument or disagreement with that at all. But management can turn around and say, yeah, we want these people in the office. So then it becomes the mix of, okay, how much space do we need for new hires? How long are we going to need it? How many of these new hires are going to want to telework? Because not everybody wants frequent telework. Some people do go into the office. So it's a juggling act that facilities and every agency has to figure out. And like I said, it's not an easy fix.
All right, something that I want to bring up that sort of dovetails what you just talked about this proposal versus actual chance of being enacted. NTEU has been pushing for an 8.7% raise for the next year. President is offering something, I think, over 5%. You can give me that. I forgot the actual amount, but NTEU is pushing for an 8.7% average raise for next year, and also something new: 12 weeks of Family Medical Leave Act of paid leave. It's unpaid leave right now, and 12 weeks of paid leave outside your other leave balances. That's what NTEU is pushing. Other federal unions and others are pushing for this, both in the public and private sector. These are proposed bills. Sort of tell us the status of both of those.
Yeah, we're pushing hard on both of those, Larry, at a national level. The 8.7% raise, we feel that, with inflation the way it was, we're just trying to play catch up. Plus, what people are getting paid in the private sector, we're trying to even that up as well. The 8.7 won't get us there, but it's a good start. The president has proposed a 5.2% raise. One of the things that I like about the 8.7 that NTU is pushing, as Tony Reardon, our national president, explained it, we're looking at a 4%, a 4.7% raise across the board, and then a 4% locality pay. So that, people say, well, you don't need as much money in Indianapolis as you do in San Francisco or New York. Well, with that 4% locality pay added in there, that would equal a lot of that out. So I think it's a very good strategy and something that should be workable and understandable by folks in Congress. Whether it will end up hitting that mark or not, I don't know, but we are fighting for that. And again, you can go on the NTU website and talk to your congressman and your senators about that. The other one, the 12 weeks of paid leave for family medical leave. Family Medical Leave Act, when it was first enacted, was okay, you can spend time with your family, but we're not going to give you the pay for it. You can just take off. Well, the U.S. is one of the very few industrial nations across the world that doesn't have this paid family leave as part of it. And so we're trying to catch up with that. And I think there are some folks in Congress that are listening to this, because there are child care issues, there are elder care issues, there are your own health issues that you have, that, there should be something. You shouldn't have to go without pay to take care of these types of things. And so that's what the 12 weeks of paid FMLA the bill is looking to do. And once again, they're trying to get the federal government to be a model for the rest of the private sector. If the private sector sees, hey, the federal government is doing this, it's working well, let's go ahead and budget for this and get it as well. And if it does work well for the federal government, Congress can also make that a law for private businesses as well. So these are two things that NTU is really pushing for. The especially the paid leave is something NTU has been pushing for years, and I'm sure will continue to push, just because we think it's the right thing to do.
And we'll keep you posted on how these proposals go through Congress. It's a long, winding process with its ups and downs. And we'll continue on this podcast and through other communication venues to keep you up to date. I want to go back a little bit historically, because I became a union steward back in the late 80s and became more and more involved in union activities in the early 1990s. When Bill Clinton became president in 1993, one of the first things he did was issue an executive order calling for what's called a partnership between federal unions and federal agencies. It was really a different way of doing business. IRS started a program called TQO, Total Quality Organization. Duncan, you're not allowed to laugh. Now, He is. Now, the thing I want to mention about that is this was a sincere effort by the union and the management to just uplift the entire agency. And way of doing that is partnering on major issues, not on everything, but on certain issues that impact the employees. NTEU was involved before decisions were made. Well, there's, partnership sort of came and went, and that executive order came and went. But one thing that has survived off and on since those years is something called pre-decisional involvement, which is very close to what partnership was envisioned to be. So I guess, Duncan, what I would ask you to do at this point is talk about this whole idea of pre-decisional involvement that goes all the way back to 93, maybe by another name. Just what impact this could have on employees in Indiana where we are, and even nationally when it comes to union management relationships.
Yeah, this is something that I've worked to do and done many times very successfully over the years. And I know that our national folks, our national president, Tony Reardon, vice president, Doreen Greenwald, director of negotiations, Ken Moffett, have all pushed hard for these. Pre-decisional involvement, some executives and management get, well, you just want to co-run the organization. No, 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 God, no. Thank you. No, thank you. What we want to do is and we do this locally or we do this nationally, management has an idea of something that they want to do. Run it by us first. For God's sakes, run it by us first. We can sit there and talk about it. If there are potential pitfalls you may not have thought of, as you spoke of, Larry, of impacting the employees, we can address that. A wonderful example of this is the surge. If they'd have come to us, when the surge issues first started coming, when they basically started getting these pile ups of all this inventory, it would have been a much smoother and much better process than, oh my God, it's a month, we're a month before total collapse. We need to get this done right now. And, we have to pull people off the phones and we have to do this, we have to do that. Well, there was a much better way to do it, and pre-decisional involvement several months prior to this, because it shouldn't have been a surprise that the inventory was there and rising. If it was a surprise, I'm very concerned that if we talked about this beforehand, we could have done it in a much better, more orderly manner that would have been better for the employees. The employees would have been happier, would have had more opportunities to volunteer instead of being drafted, and it would have worked out better for everyone. But instead, when you don't get pre-decisional involvement, when something is just thrust at you, then it's like, okay, now we're playing catch up. It can become, instead of interest-based for everybody, more adversarial, which doesn't really help anyone. And okay, on pre-decisional, okay, what are you trying to get to? What are your interests? What do you want to do? And I can't tell you the number of times, and I still do, have these kind of talks with managers, territory managers, third level managers, executives. What are you trying to accomplish? Okay, you're trying to accomplish A, you want to do B. Well, C might be a better way to get there, getting you the same results as A does, but it's going to have a much less impact on employees and be much better for employees. So therefore, they're going to be more willing to do it. So those are the types of things we talk about pre-decisional involvement. It's not co-running the IRS. It's basically trying to solve problems up front rather than once it's implemented.
Well, having been both a union official and a manager, I can't imagine any union official wanting to actually manage the agency. So I'm with you on that, Duncan. There's no desire to do that, but pre-decisional involvement on issues impacting the employees often does draw benefits for both sides. And you gave a great example of that surge trying to get the paper inventory done, where IRS, I think, would have benefited doing pre-decisional involvement, made a very specific decision not to do that. And I think that hurt the agency as well as the employees. Had NTEU come in early, I think that would have, first of all, the inventory would have been taken care of much more quickly and the employees would have felt better about it. That's just my view, but I think that's also yours. I want to move on to something else. webinars are kind of a big thing now. That's where you go on the internet and do kind of a training class, video, audio. There was a recent webinar, live one, that NTU put on dealing with workplace discrimination. So even if you missed the live version of that, you can still watch that webinar, correct?
Absolutely. If you're an NTU member, you can go onto the website. It's got a lot of good information on it. Not only, what you can do, but what is workplace discrimination? How does it look? What is the actual legal definition? What has to happen? What type of notes? So it's something that can be very interesting and helpful to employees that they may want to take a look at. This is something you take a look at on your own time, but I think it could be beneficial for folks who are, feeling that their workplace may not be the best, because we hear I'm being discriminated against or harassed or things of that nature all the time. And oftentimes it doesn't meet that legal definition. And this webinar is a good way to take a look at it and find out what sort of legal basis that you need to have to be able to claim that.
So again, that webinar is available. It's nteu.org. And if you're registered as a member, you can access it. If you're not registered, you are a member, do it. It's very easy. And Duncan, is there any special thing you need to know to find it on the website?
No, if it doesn't pop up pretty quickly, which it should, then all you need to do is pop up a webinar, and they'll have those and the other webinars that are out there that our great communications department, led by Sheila McCormick, puts out.
Yes, we've had Sheila as a guest on our podcast, does great work in the communication realm for NTU at the national level. One thing I want to mention now is that, we all, I wouldn't say all, but most of us who work for the federal government are part of FEHB, the Federal Employee Health Benefit Program. And there's a long list of insurers we can use, both some local ones and some national ones, depending on the type of coverage you choose. And sometimes it's a tough decision, but every year we all come through that. What basically happens with FEHB, it's OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, which is kind of the HR department for the entire civilian workforce. And they always put out a letter about what the minimum standards will be for that FEHB program. And the letter came out recently from OPM to these insurers. And what the letter contained is something new. The FEHB program for those insurers involved are going to be expected to include in that coverage package fertility coverage. This is a new thing, Duncan.
Yeah, it's a very new thing, and it's very interesting. It's one of those things, we do have a very seasoned workforce, so there may or may not be, a ton of employees who do this, but for those who do want to avail themselves of doing fertility things, in vitro fertilization, things of that nature, this could be a huge boon to them. And I'm also thinking this is a nice recruiting tool to try and get new blood in the IRS as we hire more people. So I think for the federal government, for OPM to do this, it's a good step and something that is forward thinking, and hopefully we'll have some more options for folks that want to avail themselves of something like this.
And IRS, of course, as it looks to hire over the next 8 years, will probably use this as a recruiting tool. I have a friend of mine that went to work for a startup company, and she was interviewing with them, and she asked, what is your parental leave policy? They looked at each other and said, well, we don't have one. Let's write one now. So but that was funny. But I think fertility coverage will have an impact on future hires and attracting people who want to come to work for the federal government. So with that, I want to say one quick thing. We will not have a podcast next week. You can blame me. I've got some personal situations that will keep me busy next week. So we do plan to come back in 2 weeks. And with that in mind, Duncan Giles, your final comment.
Oftentimes I talk to a lot of employees who are unhappy or angry about a whole lot of situations, their job, personal things of that nature. And, I just want to urge people, if you're not happy with something, what are you doing to work to change it? If you're not happy with your job, which is understandable with a lot of positions. Are you looking? Are you actively looking for something else? Are you trying? If you're not happy with your relationship, are you working at that? Are you trying to see what you can do to make it better? Or if it's beyond repair, what steps are you taking to try and make yourself happy? That's what you need to do. Happiness is an inside job. You need to do what you can to make yourself happy. So, you realize it's going to take action on your part to move forward in a lot of these issues. People can help. People like myself can help. We can advise. We can talk to you. But bottom line is you're going to have to do these things to ultimately solve your situation, to make yourself happy in these types of situations.
Duncan, when I was a union official, I always had a box of Kleenex nearby. And some of my coworkers couldn't understand why I needed that. And I said, well, I have to talk to people in my union steward duties. And you would be surprised at some of the people that totally break down when they sit down and tell me the situations they're dealing with. And a lot of these situations are, in fact, personal situations, that are happening in their lives that are impacting their work life. So, yeah, I think that's very good advice and well put. I'm going to make a quick comment. Just this is totally my own feeling, going all the way back to when I came to work for IRS in 1983 and immediately signed up to become a member of NTEU. There's a big difference in how, as an institution, NTEU runs itself and how the management or the agency runs itself. You have no voice in who your immediate manager is going to be, or who your next level manager is going to be, or who the executives will be. This is totally within the inherent responsibility and rights of the management. They have a right to decide who their top people will be. A union is run differently. Unions are democratic institutions. So, for example, Chapter 49 will soon have an election. Officers will be elected. It will be the vote of the members that will determine who wins those elections. Nationally, those elections are held by the people elected by the local chapters, and they elect the national president, executive vice president. And even the other vice presidents are done and are elected in a democratic manner by those chapter officials. I don't think we appreciate often enough just the strength that comes from being a democratic institution. This is one of the great strengths of not just NTEU, but almost every union, even private or public sector in America. They all have some form of democratic governing systems. So I think I just want to remind everybody just how important that is. And when you have a chance to vote in a local election, don't blow it off. Pay attention, look at that ballot, find out about the candidates, cast your vote, and send in that vote. I just think that's one of the great strengths of any union. And with that, I will close out our Chapter 49 podcast for this particular week. Again, we'll take a week off next week. I'll take responsibility for that one. I've got some personal situations to deal with, which I'll talk more about in a couple of weeks for you. But it's always a pleasure. Duncan and I do this not because we have to, but because we think it's important. And we take the time out. I take time out of my personal schedule, and Duncan takes time out of his busy schedule of being a chapter president, because those of you in Indiana and some people nationally, I dare say internationally on occasion, actually do listen and watch this podcast. Listen to it on our audio version podcast, and even in our video YouTube version of it. So we thank you for spending a little time with us once again on our Chapter 49 podcast. In the meantime, please be safe and be kind.